Every time I bought something, I went straight for the damaged goods, the more expensive, the better. Ideally, something already smashed to pieces. Everyone whispered behind my back that I was a fool, but what they didn't understand was that every purchase was building my strength. But in the middle of my frantic collecting spree, I accidentally shattered the young mistress's prized jade pillow. She had me locked in the woodshed and starved for 4 days. Steward Song Yun looked at my pathetic state and relayed her verdict. Once your punishment ends, you're being reassigned to the junk room. For a servant, that's a dead end, no future at all. He expected me to break down. Instead, I just said calmly, my thanks for the young mistress's mercy. Song Yun's fist clenched. Know your place. The second young mistress has been at the Immortal sect for 3 years without sending a single letter home. You really think she remembers a servant like you? Just rot here, then. He slammed the door behind him. But he had no idea this arrangement suited me perfectly. The junk room was quiet, packed with all kinds of damaged goods, exactly where I wanted to be. First, though, I had to survive the starvation punishment. 3 days later, just as hunger was about to break me, the second young mistress's maid Xiaokai slipped in quietly. The young mistress was watching too closely these past 2 days. I brought you a steamed bun, eat it while it's warm. But to her surprise, I turned it down. My sentence ends tomorrow, better not risk this bun causing trouble. Better safe than sorry, no need to complicate things further. Besides, I had something more important to ask of her. Xiaokai, could you help me get the broken pieces of that jade cup? Xiaokai didn't ask questions, she agreed and hurried off. What I never expected was that the eldest young mistress, Song Lingxue, was standing in the shadows the entire time, watching Xiaocai's every move. Young mistress, it's cold tonight, you should rest. Song Yun looked at Song Lingxue's thin robes with concern. But her expression stayed ice cold. What did he say to you that day? He thanked you for your mercy. Mercy. What an obedient dog. Song Lingxue gave a cold laugh and turned to leave. The Song family now rested entirely on her shoulders. Eventually, she'd need to take in a husband to carry the family line. But she didn't trust outsiders, and I was the only one in this household whose appearance she found tolerable. After several attempts at testing me were rebuffed, her patience had run dry. Since I clearly wasn't interested, she had no intention of forcing the matter further. Little did she know, a transformation she never anticipated was about to unfold. Not long after, as my repair count reset in my mind once more, I used it again on the broken harmony fist technique, and finally completed its full restoration. The next instant, a breathing technique flooded into my mind. The Song family had only ever passed down the fist forms themselves, this breathing method had never been part of their tradition. What surprised me most was that this breathing technique shared common ground with the pre-Qin Qi cultivation method's earth endurance technique I'd encountered by chance in my past life. I immediately sat cross-legged and tried to draw in the energy of heaven and earth. 2 hours of meditation later, I had nothing to show for it. But when I glanced casually at the panel in my mind, what I saw left me stunned. Reparable, heart increase, grand heavenly cycle breathing manual, beginner's volume. So my earlier effort hadn't been pointless after all. The next evening, just as I finished my meal, I was sent off to the junk room. The place was packed with old, decaying objects, and I was thoroughly satisfied with it. Just as I was waiting for my repair count to refresh, there was a sudden knock at the door. Xiaokai had rushed over with a cloth sack. Every fragment is in here. I let out a breath of relief and took it. Thank you, I'll repay this kindness someday. Xiaokai didn't dare linger and hurried off. I shut the door, opened the sack, and information instantly flooded my mind. A bonus item, a spirit vase. If nurtured with care over the years, it had the potential to develop true spiritual sentience. You shattered it with your own hands, but fortunately every fragment is here, so the repair won't be difficult. What surprised even me was that I had no intention of restoring it through the panel at all. This vase was the most precious artifact I'd encountered so far, I had bigger plans for it. The next day, I swept out the junk room thoroughly, then went out to buy restoration materials. By evening, I'd barely managed to gather everything I needed. But the moment I returned to the Song estate, I caught wind of some exciting news. The second young mistress, gone without word for years, had returned home. I was endlessly curious about cultivation, and the second young mistress was my only connection to that world. I rushed straight to the main hall. But for some reason, I stopped in the hallway. Caught up in my excitement, I'd forgotten my place. Without being summoned, I had no right to set foot in the main hall at all. Just as I was about to give up and turn back, the eldest young mistress's group suddenly rounded the corner. And then something even stranger happened. The moment I glanced at the man beside her, my body bowed its head completely on its own. There was no doubt, this man had to be from an immortal sect. I had no choice but to bow and step aside, clearing the path. But unexpectedly, the eldest young mistress studied me for a moment, then spoke. Never mind, my sister was just telling me how sentimental she's been feeling. Let's talk inside. She glanced at the man beside her. Apologies for the lack of discipline in this household, I hope it didn't amuse you too much. The man gave the faintest shake of his head, though he hadn't said a single word, his presence was overwhelmingly powerful. As we entered the hall, the second young mistress, Song Lingqing, looked at me in the corner with some confusion, clearly struggling to place me. This humble servant greets the second young mistress. I bowed respectfully. Song Lingqing nodded but said nothing more. I knew my place and retreated quietly to the corner, not pressing for further conversation. But as everyone settled in, even though this was supposed to be a family reunion, the head of the household, Song Tonghai, wore nothing but worry on his face. Ling Qing, when are you leaving? Staying a few more days wouldn't delay your schedule, would it? The Grand Sect tournament is still years away, nearly 10 more years before it begins. Just as joy flickered across Song Tonghai's face, Song Ling Qing suddenly shifted the conversation entirely. We leave tomorrow. The realm where the tournament is held is impossibly distant, and I need time to cultivate before it begins. 10 years is barely enough as it is. As she spoke, a complicated look crossed her eyes. I've already sworn everyone to silence. Cultivate with a clear mind, and bring honor to the sect. As she spoke, the worry in Song Ling Qing's eyes eased considerably. Qin Feng remained silent the entire time, not uttering a single word, until nightfall, when everyone finished their meal and dispersed. But once I returned to my room, sleep wouldn't come. I'd gathered very little information tonight. Song Tonghai seemed to have some kind of plan, and he hadn't asked Song Ling Qing a single question about her life at the sect. Song Ling Qing hadn't volunteered anything either. Just as I sat there frustrated, the second young mistress's voice suddenly called out from beyond my door. My heart skipped, the chance I thought I'd just lost had reappeared right in front of me. And she revealed the real reason she'd come looking for me. Considering how many years you've served me, do you have any wish? Today, I'll grant it. My eyes lit up instantly. I was about to ask for my freedom, but I shut my mouth before the words came out. Compared to the secrets of the immortal sects, my own circumstances suddenly felt utterly insignificant. So instead, I said, this humble servant would like some texts from the immortal sections. Song Ling Qing's brow furrowed. You don't carry any immortal artifact, you can't draw spirit energy into your body at all. Wealth and a beautiful wife are what a servant like you should be wishing for. But what I said next caught her completely off guard. I don't want a cultivation method. I just want any texts connected to the immortal sects, anything at all. Song Ling Qing couldn't help but warn me. Some knowledge, once you possess it but can never act on it, becomes a lifelong burden. Strangely, hearing her response actually put my mind at ease. It meant this knowledge wasn't some critical secret, something she felt comfortable sharing. So I said earnestly, I simply want to open my eyes and see this world. Nothing more. Very well. Song Ling Qing nodded and left. In the end, she left me 4 texts. But she had no idea this decision nearly cost me my life. After Song Ling Qing left, I poured every repair attempt I had that day into the Grand Heavenly Cycle Breathing Manual. From the very beginning, I'd never had any intention of pursuing a true cultivation method. My hope was set on the Pre-Qing Chi cultivation method instead. Since Song Ling Qing herself believed I couldn't cultivate, then surely I couldn't, and there was no point wasting effort chasing something else. As expected, when I leafed through those texts, I learned that cultivation required an immortal bone as a medium to absorb the spirit energy of heaven and earth and enter the Qi nurturing realm. One could live past 150 years at the peak of that realm. Once the Dantian birthed true power, you advanced into the spirit spring realm, a lifespan exceeding 300 years. I read straight through until dawn, before reluctantly setting the texts down. My anticipation only grew. Would the Pre-Qing Chi cultivation method work the same way? Little did I know, a massive crisis was already waiting for me. The moment Song Ling Qing left, she sent lavish gifts, and right behind them came gift registries from every noble house and sect across the region. News of her homecoming had clearly leaked. In the main hall, Song Tonghai stared furiously at the mountain of gifts. News spread this fast, there must be a leak inside this household. Song Yun, investigate thoroughly. I'm granting you full authority to act on your judgment. If the evidence is solid, kill them and feed them to the dogs. Song Yun bowed stiffly and left to begin the investigation. As for the chaos brewing outside, I had no interest in any of it. My entire focus was on repairing the spirit vase. Using a specially prepared solution, I gave the reassembled vase another careful pass. The next instant, a notification flashed through my mind. You spent considerable effort restoring this spirit vase. Your skill has improved. Watching 32 experience points appear under Repair Master Overview, a flicker of joy crossed my eyes. 5 repairs a day was far too few. I needed to level up my Repair Master rank as fast as possible. But before I could fully savor the moment, an unwelcome visitor showed up at the previously deserted junk room. Song Yun had captured 6 people in just a few short days, and his investigation had quickly led him to the junk room I called home. He'd only meant to check the box, but stumbled onto an unexpected discovery. Those few books were found in a search. Song Ling Qing had left in a rush that day without telling anyone, and someone of my standing should never have had access to such texts. So once again, I was locked in the woodshed. Song Yun reported the matter, along with my recent movements, straight to Song Lingxue. She stared at me with a dark expression. Why have you been sneaking out so often these past few days? Do you have contacts outside this estate? I told the truth, I'd simply gone to buy materials, hoping to repair the spirit vase as atonement. I pulled out the fully restored vase and offered it with both hands. Song Lingxue's expression softened slightly. She took the vase, then steered the conversation back to its core. Where did these immortal sect texts come from? I answered honestly, explaining the whole sequence of events. Song Lingxue's expression shifted with surprise. Why didn't you take the opportunity to demand a ransom of gold and silver, or your freedom? My answer caught everyone off guard. I lost my parents as a child, the Song family gave me a path to survive. I raised my eyes to meet Song Lingshue's gaze. This humble servant deserved death for shattering an immortal artifact. The young mistress's mercy spared my life, and I intend to repay that debt. As I saw it, my predecessor in this body had been somewhat ungrateful. The eldest young mistress had wanted to keep her by her side, but she'd refused, over and over. A real man knows when to bend, pride isn't worth much. At that moment, Song Yun, watching my sincere expression, felt a chill of alarm shoot through him. This was absolutely not the person he knew. He glanced anxiously at Song Lingxue, and sure enough, Song Lingxue's gaze had already softened. Sweat broke out across Song Yun's back. The old me had been nothing but a pretty face with empty words, never once had I made him feel threatened like this. This brush with danger had genuinely taught me a lesson. Fine, since this matter is settled, you have no further business here. Song Lingxue waved a hand. Since my sister gave you those books, you may keep them. I see your point clearly, young mistress. I let out a breath of relief and was about to turn and leave, when she suddenly called me back. Go to the accounting office and collect 20 taels of silver. Consider it a reward. I bowed deeply. My thanks for the young mistress's generosity. Seeing that I didn't decline the reward, Song Lingshue's opinion of me improved a little further, and she spoke again. It would be a waste to bury talent like yours here. Move to the family storehouse, there are antiques there that need repair. I'll double your wages. Thank you, young mistress. My eyes lit up. The Song family's entire treasury was kept in that storehouse. The next morning, at the crack of dawn, I hurried over to the storehouse. As I was about to pass through the front gate, a deafening explosion suddenly rang out. For some reason, despite my burning curiosity, I forced myself to keep walking straight to the storehouse without looking back. Unnecessary curiosity only invited trouble, best to know as little as possible in situations like this. Sure enough, the moment I arrived at the storehouse, an unexpected piece of news swept through the front courtyard. The Song estate had set up a dueling platform. Song Lingxue was about to engage in a sparring match. An hour earlier, Prince Guanyin had arrived with his son Zhao Qichang to propose a marriage alliance. He'd assumed he could pressure the Song family with his status, but Song Lingxue, upon hearing of it, scoffed. Beat me first, then we'll talk about marriage. Song Lingshue's exceptional martial talent was no secret, but Prince Guanyin had never imagined her cultivation realm would be this advanced. He shook his head, though satisfaction was plain in his eyes. With the second daughter already inducted into the Immortal sect, this eldest daughter was the family's only remaining heir. He'd never seriously considered marrying her off. Prince Guanyin's proposed alliance had never been something Song Tonghai entertained. He thought the matter had ended there, but Prince Guanyin suddenly shifted the subject entirely. That phoenix raised in your household seems to have caught quite a few eyes. Word that a true disciple of Huanling sect has descended the mountain has already spread across the four kingdoms. Then Prince Guanyin spoke something strange in a quiet voice. That phoenix has guardians watching over her, your Song estate has none, surely you understand. Song Tonghai didn't respond, as if struck by some unseen shock. Prince Guanyin gave a faint smile. If you run into trouble, you may come to me. At least within the bounds of this dynasty, no one would dare touch the Zhao imperial bloodline. With that, he strode out of the Song estate. But strangely, once Song Tonghai had seen Prince Guanyin off, the alarm that had gripped him earlier completely vanished, and he returned to his study with a stony expression. Seeing her father's grim look, Song Lingxue couldn't quite understand. Father, why are you targeting me? But Song Tonghai's expression only grew colder. Prince Guanyin is using this as leverage. He wants to force me to marry you to his son. Song Lingxue couldn't help but frown. If there's truly no other way, I'll marry into the royal household. One way or another, marriage is inevitable for me. But Song Tonghai gave a cold scoff in response. You think the royal household is some kind of refuge? If any true sect truly wanted to come after our family, do you think Prince Guanyin would dare so much as breathe wrong? Is it because I failed to enter the sect myself, that I've disappointed you, father? Watching his daughter's dejected expression, Song Tonghai's heart softened. How could I trade my own daughter for safety? No child of the Song family has ever begged for survival on their knees. As he spoke, a dangerous glint flashed in his eyes. If any demons or monsters dare cross our threshold, this old man and his children will cut down every last one who comes. Meanwhile, outside Luofeng City, Zhao Jichang stood with his head lowered. Your son is incompetent, father, I've embarrassed you. But Prince Guanyin seemed entirely unbothered. What good is face? Can you eat it? A real man shouldn't dwell on such trivial setbacks. The bloodline running through that Song family is truly unlike anything ordinary. Less than 300 years, and they've already produced 2 grandmasters, plus 1 immortal sprout. And now, it seems, a 3rd grandmaster is on the way. His eyes narrowed slightly. So you can rest easy, that girl will be yours eventually. If a bloodline like that married into the Zhao family, the odds of producing descendants with true immortal bones would be substantial. A little over 10 days passed. On the surface, the Song estate appeared as ordinary as ever, but stationed in the storehouse, I picked up on something unusual. Lately, carriages had been frequently hauling wooden crates out of the storehouse. I didn't know where they were headed. It struck me as odd, but I didn't dwell on it, my focus remained entirely on the grand heavenly cycle breathing manual. Then one day, the entry-level technique was finally fully restored. Anyone can cultivate, but the speed depends on natural aptitude. I immediately went to the courtyard and sat cross-legged, attempting to draw in the moon's radiant essence. Within moments, I felt a cool, refreshing current flow in through the crown of my head and spread to my limbs. By the time I opened my eyes again, it was nearly noon, 18 full cycles complete. My overall memory had more than doubled, and a current of true energy was now flowing through my meridians. This was still just the beginning stages of chi cultivation. Only after 100 days of training would I become a genuine chi cultivator. But time was running short. In a side chamber at that very moment, Song Yun lay on his bed, eyes shut tight, his body wrapped in bandages. Song Lingxue pushed the door open. "Father, what exactly happened? Where did Song Yun get hurt?" "At the city gate. He took an arrow from the shadows," Song Tonghai said gravely. "An arrow fired from over 300 feet away. Whoever could draw a bow with that kind of power had to be a grandmaster." Song Lingshue's eyes flashed cold. "This is a warning. Father, something has clearly gone wrong in Luofeng City. Perhaps we should recall every agent stationed throughout the city." But Song Tonghai's expression remained calm. "Our family isn't worth a true sect's personal attention. Whoever struck must have been acting on someone else's orders. Their goal is to force us into begging Huanling sect for help, to test their response." As he spoke, Song Tonghai seemed to have reached an important decision. His gaze suddenly turned cold. "Lingxue, you're coming with me tonight when I leave the estate." The next morning, I went out to buy provisions, just in case. But strangely, even with silver in hand, I couldn't purchase a single grain of food anywhere. The grain shops gave every excuse imaginable, but the bottom line was, they wouldn't sell to me. I quickly realized something was wrong. Someone was specifically targeting the Song family. So I ducked into a tailor's shop, changed out of my outer robes, and only then managed to buy what I needed without trouble. Back at the estate, lunch that day was noticeably smaller than usual, just 3 steamed buns and a small dish of vegetables. Just as I started to think the Song family's situation was deteriorating, I heard some startling news. Overnight, the city walls had been hung with severed heads. And most critically of all, one of them belonged to a grandmaster. Song Tonghai, as a local power, was naturally the prime suspect, yet no one dared say it aloud. Even the city government stayed silent. I quickly felt the ripple effects of those severed heads myself. That evening, my dinner wasn't just back to normal, it was even more generous than usual, with an extra 5 pounds of mutton ribs and 2 pounds of beef thrown in. The meal eased some of my tension, but I didn't dare let my training slip. Among the storehouse items, I finally settled on a pair of iron shears. These particular shears were forged to withstand tremendous force, well suited to someone with strength like mine. After the storehouse was emptied out, my arm strength had grown considerably weaker by comparison. I carried this pair of iron shears back to my quarters successfully. Over the following days, I trained at dawn, repaired items in the storehouse during the day, and practiced with the shears late at night when everything was quiet. I thought things had finally settled into a peaceful rhythm, until one day, Song Lingxue suddenly warned me. "Stay safely within the estate these next few days, don't go anywhere." Something stirred in my chest. I nodded and agreed. Song Lingxue never spoke this way without reason, she'd clearly received some kind of news. But what I never expected was that the crisis would arrive far sooner than I anticipated. On the 4th night, around midnight, just as I was about to begin my cycle of cultivation, a sudden wave of battle cries erupted outside. I instantly grabbed my iron shears and gripped them tight, weighing whether to advance or retreat. At that same moment, in a side chamber in the back courtyard of the Song estate, Song Yun's eyes snapped open. The sound of battle reached his ears, and his expression shifted instantly. Just as he forced his chi to circulate and tried to sit up, Xiaokai burst in, panicked. "You can't move right now, lie back down. The central courtyard has already been blocked by several guards bringing reinforcements." These past few days, he had been the one tending to Song Yun. No one understood Song Yun's injuries better than he did. The slightest misstep could rupture his heart's meridians. But Song Yun shoved Xiaokai aside and began dressing. "Where is the young mistress?" Xiaokai reluctantly let go. "The head of the household is at the young mistress's side right now, and the young mistress's martial skill far exceeds yours anyway. You don't need to worry so much." But for some reason, Song Yun fell into a brooding silence, and then his eyes suddenly sharpened. "Has anyone gone to the storehouse?" "The storehouse has already been emptied out, there's no reason anyone would be guarding it." But hearing Xiaocai's words, Song Yun's expression changed completely. He grabbed an arrow and strode out immediately. At the same moment, I stood frowning at the storehouse gate. Just as I was about to make a run for it, Song Yun's voice suddenly rang out behind me. "Come with me, I'll get you out safely." He moved toward the storehouse gate as he spoke. I gave him an odd look. "Are you here to save me?" Song Yun's face was deathly pale. "Don't waste time talking, move. I'm forcing my chi just to stay upright, it won't last much longer." He knew that if I died, the eldest young mistress would be devastated. But just as his voice trailed off weakly, the storehouse gate suddenly collapsed with a thunderous crash. A figure emerged through the dust, sword in hand, visible blade light coiling along its edge. Song Yun's face went even paler, inner energy manifesting outwardly. This was a master with 1 foot already over the threshold into grandmaster territory. Even at his full strength, Song Yun would have struggled to match this man. Run, now, Song Yun bellowed, spinning around, but to his shock, there was no one behind him at all. I had already closed the distance and stood directly in front of the man in black, an overwhelming wave of pressure unfurling instantly. The man in black visibly flinched, instinctively starting to retreat, when a piercing whistle suddenly cut through the air right by his ear. He scrambled to raise his sword in defense. There was a sharp clang as my iron shears slammed brutally into the flat of his blade, and the inner energy wrapped around the sword instantly shattered. But the worst was yet to come. Under the sheer force of impact, the blade bent into a perfect 90-degree angle and slammed heavily into his body. A crisp, violent crack rang out as the man in black was sent flying, smashing into half a section of the courtyard wall. But I wasn't done. I closed the distance with a single stride and swung the iron shears down again, aimed straight at his head. In an instant it was as if a rotten watermelon had burst open. Song Yun stood there stunned. 2 strikes had killed a man who'd nearly achieved Grandmaster status. Even a true Grandmaster wouldn't have outdone that. What was even stranger, when I'd struck, Song Yun hadn't sensed even the faintest ripple of inner energy from me. He couldn't help but ask, "When did you become a Grandmaster?" But I just answered offhandedly. "I was just born unusually strong." Song Yun's face was full of disbelief. He started to say something else, when a sudden sharp pain seized his chest. His eyes went dark and he collapsed to the ground. I rushed over and reached out to check on him. What I felt under my fingertips was a chaotic, scattered pulse, almost indistinguishable from a death pulse. But just as I assumed he was beyond saving, the panel in my mind suddenly lit up with a notification. Currently reparable, Song Yun. A fatal sword wound on the chest. Forcing his chi triggered near-fatal complications. This left me momentarily stunned. So I could even repair people. I had no time to dwell on it. I immediately, experimentally, used 2 of today's repair attempts on him. Sure enough, Song Yun's pulse began to stabilize. He was still gravely wounded, but no longer in mortal danger. "You're lucky to be alive," I muttered quietly, dragging him under the bed for safety before hurrying toward the front courtyard. But just as I crossed into the next courtyard, I came face to face with 2 men in black. Both sides braced for a strike, but strangely, after sizing each other up for a moment, we both relaxed our guard. As I saw it, the vital energy radiating from these 2 was even weaker than the warrior I just smashed to pieces moments ago. And in the eyes of these 2 men in black, my steps were heavy, clearly someone who hadn't even condensed his inner energy yet. Decent looking, though. Let's skin his face off and turn it into a mask afterward, might as well make use of that face. I didn't respond to that. I simply stepped forward and swung the iron shears down hard, accompanied by the same piercing whistle through the air. This man was clearly an outer sect master too. The men in black's expressions changed instantly, mirroring the warrior's reaction from before, scrambling to raise their blades in defense. But the result was the same, both their skulls shattered under the impact. Yet I didn't stop there. I rushed straight to the training grounds. The place was already complete chaos, fighting breaking out everywhere. The most striking sight was the head of the household, Song Tonghai. He was being surrounded by 3 grandmasters, but showed no signs of losing. Beside him, the eldest young mistress Song Lingxue was equally conspicuous, surrounded by no fewer than 6 men in black. Just as Song Lingxue was on the verge of collapse, Song Tonghai took a brutal hit from one grandmaster head-on. He suddenly spun and unleashed a slash of sword energy, instantly severing one of the black-clad attacker's hand. Though this eased the pressure on Song Lingxue somewhat, Song Tonghai himself was gradually losing ground. For some reason, I chose not to step in just yet. Right now, the battle was still maintaining a fragile balance. If I charged in recklessly, it could backfire and make things worse. I scanned the training grounds, and a covert plan quickly formed in my mind. I quietly slipped over to the archery range in the corner. But strangely, I only picked up a quiver of arrows, not a bow. Instead, I snapped off the arrowheads one by one. I had no real skill with archery, but in my past life, I'd actually won awards in professional dart competitions. I grabbed a handful of arrowheads and hurled 5 of them at once. The men surrounding Song Lingxue had barely registered the sound when they all dropped instantly. Be careful. The 3 grandmasters reacted quickly, immediately shielding their bodies with inner energy while scanning the area for the source. They spotted the bow in the corner soon enough, but oddly, my expression showed no trace of panic at all. Instead, I picked up a nearby spear. The next instant, my body tilted sharply backward and every muscle in my frame surged with power. The spear shot forward, like lightning slicing across the battlefield, and the wave of killing intent rolling off it instantly drained the color from all 3 grandmasters' faces. They tried to disengage and retreat, but Song Tonghai seized the opening, his sword energy disrupting their footing. At the same moment, the spear caught up with one of the grandmasters, the explosive force easily shattering his protective inner energy barrier. It pinned him firmly to the surrounding wall. Fall back, the remaining 2 grandmasters yelled, gradually retreating outward through a hail of energy. But the moment their figures vanished from sight, I suddenly collapsed to the ground. I poured every last drop of my vital energy into that single throw. Song Tonghai gave me a deep, lingering look, but didn't approach. Instead, he gathered everyone to begin clearing the courtyard. Song Lingxue, on the other hand, walked over to me, her expression somewhat dazed. "Did you kill these men?" "I did all of it," I nodded in confirmation. Combat ability had dropped by about 30% compared to before. Since I was still only 1/5 of the way through the 100-day chi cultivation cycle, and I'd already managed to forcibly kill a grandmaster. By the time I entered the spirit transformation realm, my combat power would be on an entirely different level. Song Lingxue grabbed my wrist instinctively, and a moment later, her surprise deepened further. You genuinely have no inner energy at all. So where did all this raw strength come from? After cultivating the dragon tiger body, I felt my physical strength surge significantly, I explained, forcing my way through the lie. Over this stretch of time, Song Lingxue had grown increasingly fond of me, not only supplying me with tonics, but even passing on the Song family's dragon tiger body technique. I simply attributed everything to the dragon tiger body. After all, this world had no concept of the chi cultivation method at all. But Song Lingxue's instincts told her something was off here. Just as she was puzzling over what exactly didn't add up, the sound of hoofbeats suddenly rose from outside. Only now, finally, did the city guard of Luofeng arrive, far too late. Forgive our delay, head of the household, the guard captain said. Where are the bandits? Captain Luo had clearly just woken up, yet he showed Song Tonghai not the slightest hint of respect. Song Tonghai had expected his anger at this, but instead, he responded calmly. The bandits have already retreated. My thanks to Captain Luo for the late-night rescue. But Captain Luo's next words instantly ignited the fury of the Song family's martial guards. Please hand over the bandits' corpses to me, so we can dispose of them properly and prevent disease from spreading through the city. This was nothing but a transparent attempt to steal credit for the kill, not to mention, the bodies might reveal who'd ordered the attack in the first place. For the city government to act this way reeked of complicity with the bandits. But strangely, Song Tonghai's expression remained perfectly calm. We're grateful for Captain Luo's trouble. Once the head of the household had spoken, the martial guards could only swallow their anger in silence as the city guards strode brazenly through the Song estate, hauling away every single body of the men in black. Watching Captain Luo's attitude only confirmed the suspicion I'd already formed. The Song family's current predicament had the city government actively working against them behind the scenes. That left my head spinning. As for the bloodshed, that's no real issue. The original city magistrate frowned slightly upon hearing this, seemingly disappointed. Captain Luo couldn't help but ask, puzzled. May I ask, magistrate, why are we targeting the Song family this way? The city government and the Song family have coexisted peacefully for years. But the magistrate brushed him off impatiently. Why so many questions? Don't ask what you shouldn't. Dismissed. But Captain Luo didn't move. Forgive my boldness, but the Song family's second daughter is, after all, affiliated with a true sect. If we push things too far, I worry we won't be able to bear the consequences. If you've received word of something, would you be willing to share it with me? But strangely, something flickered across the magistrate's eyes, barely perceptible, and he suddenly muttered under his breath about some terrifying presence. The next morning, I sat eating breakfast, lost in thought. Just as I was weighing whether to stay or flee, Song Lingxue suddenly sat down beside me. Have you had enough to eat? Would you like more? I swallowed the bun in my mouth and shook my head. Thinking about all the tonics and techniques Song Lingxue had given me over this stretch of time, I couldn't help but feel a quiet pang in my chest. I owed her a debt now, and I wasn't the kind of person who could simply run off and save myself while leaving her behind. But if I brought her along, the kind of pursuit we faced last night would surely keep happening, over and over. Yet thinking back to last night, something suddenly nagged at me. I felt like I'd forgotten something important. Just as I sat there frowning in thought, a sudden commotion erupted from inside the storehouse. Watching Song Yun emerge into the light, I finally realized what I'd forgotten. A wave of shame washed over me. Song Yun had dragged his badly wounded body all the way here to save me, and I'd let him spend the entire night stuffed under a bed. I was about to apologize to him when a shocking piece of news suddenly arrived. The original city magistrate and Captain Luo were dead. The heads had been hung outside the city magistrate's residence. This news triggered massive panic. The imperial government's credibility had nearly collapsed entirely. Within a day, entire families were fleeing the city with their belongings. Within 2 days, the news had traveled tens of thousands of miles, reaching the heart of the empire. Outrageous. In the Shinlan Hall, the emperor flew into a rage. This is a blatant act of defiance against the throne itself. Calm yourself, your majesty. These criminals must be apprehended swiftly. The ministers all chimed in, and the emperor quickly composed himself. He immediately gave the order, dispatch 500 soldiers to garrison Luofeng City, uncover the full truth within half a month, and bring the ringleader to the capital in chains. Also, summon Prince Guanyin to see me at once. At that moment, Prince Guanyin, unaware he'd caught the emperor's attention, sat in his study muttering to himself. This king truly underestimated Song Tonghai. Beside him, Zhao Jichang couldn't hide his shock. Father, are you saying that the magistrate and Captain Luo's deaths were Song Tonghai's doing? But Prince Guanyin let out a soft sigh. It's not nearly as simple as you think. This matter could very well draw the attention of true sections. But regardless of whether Song Tonghai is behind it or not, he's brought a world of trouble on himself either way. Seeing his son's confused expression, Prince Guanyin was about to explain further when a long announcement suddenly rang out from outside the residence. Imperial Edict. Prince Guanyin's eyes narrowed slightly. Get yourself ready, we're heading to the palace at once. But surprisingly, the moment Prince Guanyin arrived at the palace, the emperor struck him hard across the face. You moved too rashly. That second Song daughter, Song Lingqing, is a top-tier immortal sprout. If she survives the Grand Sect tournament and discovers her entire family has been wiped out, how exactly do you plan to clean that mess up? But to everyone's astonishment, Prince Guanyin could only shake his head helplessly. Imperial brother, I never laid a hand on the Song family. I merely instructed that magistrate not to interfere in matters that didn't concern him. The emperor's face filled with disbelief. Is that the truth? Prince Guanyin covered his cheek. I claimed it was to mend fences. I have no intention of bringing home a daughter-in-law burdened with a blood feud against her own family. Seeing that his brother's expression didn't seem feigned, the emperor finally gave a slight nod. Good, then. Set aside whatever schemes you have. Don't meddle in the Song family's affairs any further. There are deep complications in this matter, don't burn yourself in the process. This immediately piqued Prince Guanyin's curiosity. Imperial brother, might I ask what those are? The emperor exhaled slowly, and revealed a secret of the realm. 3,000 years ago, there was once a heavenly lord with the surname Song who crossed the threshold into true immortality. His ancestral homeland lies less than 1,000,000 miles from our empire. I've consulted many records. Every neighboring nation has noble houses bearing the surname Song. And they share one astonishing commonality, nearly every one of these clans has produced an immortal sprout at some point. Prince Guanyin's expression shifted entirely. Then you're saying the Song family might be descendants of that heavenly lord? That's a staggering claim. Sect cultivators are just a group of people who practice cultivation, but a heavenly lord is a true immortal. Yet the emperor only shook his head. You needn't dwell on it too much. My interest in the Song bloodline is for entirely different reasons. Stay out of it. With that, he turned and stepped back into the inner hall. Prince Guanyin stood stunned for a moment, then left the side chamber, lost in thought. Meanwhile, back in Luofeng City, with no magistrate left to govern, countless citizens were fleeing the city. This was clearly the perfect window to escape, yet I stubbornly stuck to my cultivation schedule. With only 70 days left until my 100-day cultivation cycle completed, I figured I could stall until the imperial court got to the bottom of things. And Song Lingxue stayed by my side every single day, attending to every detail without fail. I never brought up leaving, and she never raised the subject either, as if we'd reached some unspoken understanding. I thought we could keep this steady rhythm going indefinitely, until one day, Song Tonghai suddenly sought me out, our first ever face-to-face conversation. But the moment he opened his mouth, I was left completely stunned. I'm entrusting Lingxue to you. The two of you need to flee far away, as soon as possible. I'll stay behind to buy you both some time. I waved my hands frantically. There's no need to rush, head of household. We might still have time before the court finishes its investigation. But what he said next instantly chilled me to the bone. Who do you think killed those two men? Looking at Song Tonghai's calm expression, the answer to who had killed those two men was obvious without him needing to say it. My head started pounding instantly. Killing officials, that's outright rebellion. Fleeing suddenly seemed like the best option again, but I dismissed the thought almost immediately. Running now would look exactly like fleeing from guilt. The court would issue a kill order on sight, and it might even draw the attention of the immortal sections. Just as I was racking my brain for a way to stall until my 100-day cycle completed, a critical thought suddenly struck me, and I asked tentatively, does the head of household know which sect stands behind this great vessel, and whether it's connected to the second young mistress's Huanling sect? But to my surprise, Song Tonghai shook his head. There's no sect behind that vessel. But the Zhao imperial family has disciples planted in nearly every major sect. For some reason, hearing Song Tonghai's answer actually put my mind at ease. The following day, a column of cavalry rode into Luofeng City. Every martial artist in the city was forcibly rounded up. Before long, in the magistrate's residence, Grand Marshal Li Mingzhou scanned the gathered crowd and suddenly bellowed, Song Tonghai, where were you the night Yuan Xingcai and Luo Wang lost their lives? Song Tonghai answered without hesitation. That very night, my household had just suffered an attack, and I myself was wounded. I was likely tending to my injuries at the time. Li Mingzhou studied him for a moment, then spoke in a low voice. Show me. Song Tonghai removed his upper robe without protest, revealing scars across his body, cold to the touch. But strangely, Li Mingzhou only glanced at him for a moment before waving a dismissive hand. You may go. He didn't press the rest of the Song household for questions either, and released everyone quickly. They just let them go, that easily. Those who knew the full story were baffled. That night, Luo Wang had stolen the corpses of the men in black, and Song Tonghai held a grudge and committed murder in retaliation. The motive and opportunity were both clearly there. What exactly convinced Li Mingzhou to let them go? Just as everyone stood there puzzled, Li Mingzhou suddenly pointed straight at me. You, stay. Soon, the hall was empty except for the two of us. But the first thing he said left me completely stunned. He wanted to take me on as his disciple. It turned out Li Mingzhou's judgment of talent was razor-sharp. He'd noticed at a glance that I had no inner energy at all, yet possessed natural superhuman strength, exactly the kind of successor he was looking for. I felt a wave of quiet resignation. Sure, Li Mingzhou was a grandmaster, but once I completed my 100-day qi cultivation cycle, I could defeat him with a single hand. Still, this confirmed something I'd already suspected, with the imperial Zhao family having disciples planted across every major sect, no sect could afford to take an aggressive stance toward the Song family without risking exposure. Li Mingzhou's appearance here was likely nothing more than a formality. Just as I was weighing my response, Li Mingzhou suddenly pressed his palm against thin air. A wall of solid stone, 3 feet thick, crumbled instantly under the single strike. He slowly withdrew his hand. This is a technique of open-hand combat I obtained by chance. I'm likely the only person in this world who's mastered it. Become my disciple, and I'll pass it on to you. But what he could never have guessed was that my mind was already completely absorbed by something else. The panel in my head. A Tier 5 divine technique, profound heaven seal, third incarnation, originating from the hand of a deity itself, divided into 9 total incarnations. For you, this repair would be extraordinarily difficult. What did Tier 5 even mean? It was a tier stronger than even the fully repaired dragon tiger body, only 1 tier below the grand heavenly cycle breathing manual itself. In the end, I declined as gracefully as I could. My thanks for the marshal's guidance today, but every man walks his own path, please don't trouble yourself further on my account. With that, I left the magistrate's residence at an unhurried pace. Gaining the profound heaven seal, third incarnation alone had made the entire encounter worthwhile. That night, as I was reviewing everything that had happened recently, a terrifying realization suddenly struck me. The court's neutral stance was enough proof that whoever orchestrated the night attack on the Song family had nothing to do with the imperial government at all. Which meant the truth had to lie with the immortal sex behind the scenes. I was just about to wipe the sweat beading on my forehead when a faint sound suddenly creaked above me. I snapped my head up. Someone's on the roof. And not just one person. I grabbed my iron sword immediately, gripping it tight, carefully tracking every stir of movement. As my focus sharpened, over a dozen flowing energy signatures emerged in my senses. 4 people on the roof, and the building was surrounded on all 4 sides. 5 of them had already entered the Grandmaster realm. This attack was clearly aimed squarely at me. My eyes lit with sudden clarity. I exploded off the ground and swung the iron sword down brutally against the roof's central beam. The 4-inch-thick wooden beam snapped instantly, and the entire roof collapsed in a single moment, kicking up years of accumulated dust high into the air, instantly blocking the gaze of everyone scanning the area. The men who'd been perched on the roof instinctively leapt clear, but the surrounding air was thick with dust. Strangely, even though nothing was visible in that moment, I deliberately closed my eyes and began tracking my enemies by sensation alone, building on the lessons from my last battle. 7 days had passed since then, and my raw strength had grown by another 1,000 pounds. Just as one Grandmaster searched blindly through the dust for the bedroom, a piercing whistle of displaced air suddenly rang out beside his ear. The next instant, my iron sword came down hard, and he was instantly reduced to a pool of blood. But the worst was yet to come. I drove the iron sword forward with everything I had, slamming it straight into 2 figures suspended in midair. Neither had any chance to dodge, the impact sent them flying over 100 feet, and by the time they hit the ground, they were already dead. In an instant, 3 of the 4 men on the roof were gone. But just as I was about to catch my breath, the remaining Grandmasters struck simultaneously. Gusts of fierce wind swept past, instantly opening bloody wounds across my body. But strangely, the torn flesh of my wound sights began to writhe and knit itself back together almost immediately, sealing the bleeding. My dragon tiger body had reached its full state of mastery, and my physique was no longer remotely ordinary. He's a hardened Grandmaster, use ranged weapons. The moment one of them finished shouting, countless throwing weapons came hurtling toward me. I immediately bashed straight through the wall into the weapons storeroom, and the next instant, a long spear shot out from within, killing 5 more men in a flash. The surrounding noise quickly drew attention, the head of the household and the eldest young mistress arrived at the sound. But both were already wounded, and quickly found themselves overwhelmed. I, meanwhile, stayed hidden inside the weapons storeroom, waiting for an opening. With the remaining 4 Grandmasters now on full alert, the spears I threw could no longer pose any real threat. Just as the standoff reached a stalemate, 2 streaks of light suddenly tore across the night sky, slamming into 2 of the Grandmasters and instantly reducing them to a bloody mist. Grand Marshal Li Mingzhou had arrived without warning. Against a true Grandmaster of his caliber, these men had no chance to resist at all. Within a few breaths, the remaining 2 were captured alive. Our thanks for the Marshal's intervention. Song Tonghai bowed deeply in gratitude. But Li Mingzhou paid him no attention at all. Instead, he stepped forward and ripped the disguises off the 2 captured Grandmasters. But the moment he saw one man's face clearly, Song Tonghai's brow furrowed sharply. "Yin Ping, what are you doing here?" This was an old friend he'd made years ago in Beiyan Prefecture, a place tens of thousands of miles from the Song estate. The 2 of them had no business crossing paths at all. Song Tonghai took a deep breath. "There's no feud between us. Who exactly put you up to this? Could you tell me?" But Yin Ping just hung his head, saying nothing. The other Grandmaster, however, suddenly spoke up sharply. "We were simply following orders. Kill us if you want, you'll only have outlived us by a short while anyway." But the moment his words finished, Li Mingzhou's finger shot out abruptly, and with a sudden burst of force, sliced the man's tongue clean off at the root. "I'm taking this one with me, it'll be useful when I report to His Majesty." Li Mingzhou turned to face Yin Ping. "His Majesty will summon your entire bloodline to the capital and have you executed by 1,000 cuts. Confess now, and you can die quickly, and the family you leave behind will be spared." Song Tonghai spoke up too, his voice carrying a note of pleading. "We've crossed paths once before, sir, I hope you'll grant me some answers." Finally, Yin Ping let out a bitter laugh and revealed the truth. The Pavilion of Night Light, a northern sect, had given the order. They sent me here to force you into seeking help from Huanling sect, in order to test their response. Then Yin Ping continued, his tone grave. I'd advise you to send out the news widely, let it reach Huanling sect on its own. That way, the Pavilion of Night Light will know your family can stay safe for a few months. But if a few months pass and Huanling sect still hasn't responded, the next ones to come won't be mortal men like us. Having said his piece, Yin Ping raised his head toward Li Mingzhou. May I ask, sir, does what you said earlier still hold? Li Mingzhou said nothing, but gave a slight nod. My thanks for your mercy, sir. Yin Ping bowed in gratitude, and on the spot, severed his own heart's meridian. In the end, Song Tonghai took Yin Ping's advice and wrote a letter pleading for aid. The very next morning, he sent the news out widely. If Huanling sect never responded, then preparations for the worst would need to begin. The other Grandmaster was also escorted out of the city. Citizens lined the streets to see the procession off, regaining some faith in the imperial court. As they reached the city outskirts, Li Mingzhou suddenly turned back, his voice carrying through the crowd directly to Song Tonghai. If there's a next time, I will kill you myself. Song Tonghai's expression didn't change. He bowed deeply. My thanks, Marshal. Safe travels. As the court's officials departed, Luofeng City quickly returned to calm. Li Mingzhou's visit had made the court's position clear, strict neutrality, no involvement either way. For the Song family, this was rare good news. Now, in this current situation, Huanling sect's response had become more critical than ever. But Song Tonghai held little hope for it. This situation had dragged on for so long now that Huanling sect surely already knew of the Song family's predicament, yet there had still been no response. That said everything that needed saying. If we want to survive, we'll have to save ourselves. So the day after Li Mingzhou left, Song Tonghai approached me with a plan to leave the city disguised as caravan escorts. I was full of doubt when I heard it. Even though no one had attacked the Song estate again, the area around Luofeng City was surely under covert surveillance. But Song Tonghai had clearly made up his mind. You, me, and Ling Xue will each lead a separate caravan group, splitting into 3 routes out of the city. If we make it out safely, we'll regroup somewhere in the southeast of the empire. I understood the risks of leaving the city were significant, but in the end, I nodded my agreement. It would be a good chance to test how much hidden strength was still lurking around us. Sitting around waiting to die was never a wise strategy. Soon after, I packed my belongings. But just as I was preparing to squeeze in some last training, footsteps suddenly approached from outside the courtyard. Song Lingxue stepped in with Song Yun in tow. Tomorrow, I'd ask that you take Song Yun with your group when you leave. I was a little surprised. Don't you need him by your side as support? Song Lingxue shook her head. Song Yun is too badly wounded to be much help to me, and my own combat ability is only ordinary, bringing him along would only slow me down. Then, with a hint of apology, she added, I'm truly sorry for the burden. But to her surprise, I agreed immediately. Song Yun risked his life to save me before, regardless of his reasons, that intention alone was enough. My thanks. Song Lingxue let out a breath of relief and turned to leave, but I called out to stop her. Tomorrow's journey through the caravan routes is dangerous. You're carrying an injury. I've picked up some massage techniques along the way, I should be able to help ease your condition. With that, I turned and walked back into the room, having decided to lend Song Lingxue a hand once more. She was hesitant, but skeptical or not, she followed me in. Meanwhile, Song Yun, who secretly harbored feelings for the eldest young mistress, hesitated a moment longer, but ultimately didn't follow them inside. He slowly reached out and pulled the door shut instead, then turned and looked up at the sky, the old arrow wound in his chest aching faintly, as if flaring up again. At the same time, I rolled up my sleeves and spoke casually. Please lie down on the bed, young mistress. Just rest face down, that's all that's needed. Understood. Song Lingxue glanced back at the closed door, hesitated briefly, then finally lay down at the edge of the bed. The warmth lingering on the sheets from my presence helped her relax involuntarily. But the moment my palms pressed down on her shoulders, her just relaxed nerves tensed right back up, her heart racing with growing unease. What she didn't know was that my mind wasn't on her at all, my attention was entirely fixed on the notification flashing across the panel in my head. Currently reparable, Song Lingxue. For blade and weapon wounds across her body. I gave her a brief, simple massage, then experimentally used one repair attempt. A surge of warmth instantly flooded through her body. Her eyes shot open, she could feel her internal injuries actively healing. The strange suspicions that had been forming in her mind dissolved completely. She couldn't help but ask. What an incredible technique. Where did you learn this? A massage method I picked up some time ago, I answered casually. To avoid moving too fast, I slowed the pace of the massage deliberately. Half an hour later, Song Lingxue felt completely refreshed, every trace of pain gone from her wounds entirely. There you go, young mistress. Try taking a few steps. I withdrew my hands and turned to open the door, where I found Song Yun sitting with his head down outside, a heavy, melancholy air hanging over him. I glanced at the 2 remaining repair attempts left on my panel and waved him over. Song Yun, come in. The next morning, 3 separate groups gathered out front, checking their carts and horses, preparing to depart. Amid the preparations, Song Lingxue suddenly handed me a bundle. I looked at it, confused. The weight in my hands was surprisingly heavy. For some reason, Song Lingxue didn't elaborate much, simply saying it was dried rations and travel funds, before hurrying off. Half an hour later, the three groups departed from the Song estate in staggered waves. I rode south with Song Yun. I'd expected to be intercepted, but to my surprise, the journey was smooth sailing the entire way. It wasn't until 2 days later, several hundred miles from Luofeng City, that we finally stopped to rest. Only then did I have time to open the bundle Song Lingxue had given me. Inside, besides dried rations and silver, there was also a map and a letter. When I opened the letter, its contents left me sighing deeply. It turned out Song Lingxue had predicted that of the 3 caravan routes, mine was the only one likely to escape safely, since I carried none of the Song family's bloodline. So she'd planned a path forward for me. She'd given me a route to the kingdom of Juz, a lawless, chaotic land well suited to disappearing into. As though I'd made up my mind about something, I pulled out a notebook and brush and wrote, "Hesitation and second-guessing is not the conduct of a real man. I arrived with nothing, and I'll leave this world taking nothing with me either. Worst case, death." But strangely, staring at that final word, death, I suddenly crossed it out. Going back to the Song estate wasn't necessarily a dead end after all. Beside me, Song Yun finished reading and felt his heart clench painfully. He opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off first. "I'll go back alone. You stay here and continue on to the kingdom of Juz. If the second young mistress ever returns, someone needs to be there to pass word along to her." Hearing this, Song Yun took a deep breath, then suddenly dropped to his knees and bowed his head to the ground. "I beg you, please bring the eldest young mistress back safely. If I'm ever given a chance in the future, I, Song Yun, will repay this debt of gratitude without fail. Then you'd better make sure you live long enough to do it." With that, I swung back onto my horse and rode hard toward Luofeng City. But what I didn't know was that an enormous conspiracy was already waiting for me. Meanwhile, back at the Song estate, Song Tonghai and Song Lingxue sat facing each other, father and daughter both wearing calm expressions. Unlike my situation, they'd been stopped less than 10 miles outside the city. But strangely, whoever stopped them made no move to attack, they simply forced the two of them to turn back. Father and daughter offered no resistance either, and returned to the Song estate without incident. As the days passed and there was still no sign of my return, they gradually relaxed, clearly I'd made it out safely. Just as they sat quietly waiting to see how the situation would unfold, a maidservant suddenly rushed in with news. Reporting, "Sir, there's someone outside the gate claiming to be from Huanling sect, asking for you." Huanling sect. Song Tonghai shot to his feet, his face etched with disbelief. Song Lingxue was equally stunned. Neither of them had ever imagined Huanling sect would actually extend a hand of help. "Quickly, escort them into the main hall and prepare the finest tea." Song Tonghai gave the order, then immediately gathered his inner energy and leapt onto the rooftop. A few bounds later, he'd reached the front gate. Song Lingxue followed close behind, arriving at the Song estate's entrance in the blink of an eye. But standing alone at the gate was just a single man. Song Tonghai couldn't help but ask cautiously, "May I ask if you are an elder of Huanling sect?" Without a word, the man slowly raised his hand. The next instant, a ball of flame erupted in midair, radiating a terrifying wave of heat. An outer disciple of Huanling sect, Fu Quanliang, sent by the sect to lend the Song family a hand. "Please, elder, rise." Watching this unfold, Song Tonghai rushed forward with overwhelming emotion, as if he'd just grabbed onto his last lifeline. Huanling sect sending someone at all was already a clear statement of intent. They were willing to step forward and pressure their attackers, which meant the Song family could finally rest easy. Song Lingxue felt the same wave of relief. After a moment, she turned to head back inside, but at the end of the long street, a horse suddenly burst forward and skidded to a stop in front of the gate. She stared at me, stunned. "Why did you come back?" She instinctively scanned the area behind me. I swung down from the horse and strode into the estate. "No need to look, it's just me. The others have gone on to the kingdom of Juz. Why did you come back alone?" Song Lingxue instinctively followed after me, her tone sharp with urgency. "None of this was ever your problem to begin with, why did you have to wade back into this mess?" "If I want to leave, I'll leave on my own terms, no need for you to see me off," I replied offhandedly. Cultivation starts with the mind. On the road back, I'd felt the energy circulating through my body grow noticeably smoother. "Still, good timing that you've come back now." Recalling the visitor who'd just arrived, Song Lingxue's steps grew noticeably lighter. "An elder from Huanling sect just arrived, I doubt there'll be any more trouble after this." Huanling sect actually sent someone. I couldn't help feeling surprised, quickly followed by confusion. The Song family's predicament wasn't exactly new, so why send someone now, of all times, right after the Song family's plea for help went out widely? Song Lingxue smiled and nodded. "The elder's name is Fu Quanliang, sent by Huanling." As she said the name, the suspicion in my mind only deepened further, because in my senses, this Fu Quanliang's inner energy was even weaker than Grand Marshal Li Mingzhou's. Just as my doubts kept mounting, Song Tonghai suddenly spoke up, his voice tense. "May I ask, elder, did Huanling sect receive my plea for help?" But to his surprise, Fu Quanliang looked puzzled. "I hadn't heard anything about that. I'm here on the orders of an elder, to hold things steady at the Song estate for a while." I see, so Huanling sect does genuinely care about our family, Song Tonghai nodded repeatedly. As it should be, Sister Song carries a top-tier immortal bone, and her future is limitless. She's destined to become one of Huanling sect's grand elders someday. Fu Quanliang waved a hand, his manner relaxed and friendly. I've heard your family has run into some trouble, tell me about it. If we can resolve it quickly, I can return to the sect sooner too. With that, he took a leisurely sip of tea, radiating an overwhelming confidence, as if the Song family's troubles were something he could snuff out with a flick of his fingers. Song Tonghai hesitated. I'm honestly not entirely sure myself. There are another sect's people too, we only happen to learn a single name, nothing about the deeper circumstances. But strangely, Fu Chuanliang's expression suddenly froze mid-motion, the teacup hanging suspended in mid-air. After a long silence, he finally asked, brow furrowed, what name? Song Tonghai thought for a moment before answering. I believe it was called the Pavilion of Night Light, a sect from the Northern Kingdoms, you should have heard of it, elder. But to everyone's shock, the moment Fu Quanliang heard this, his face went pale. He shot to his feet, his voice cracking. Are you certain it was the Pavilion of Night Light? There's no mistake, absolutely certain. The man said it himself, and my daughter and I both heard it. Such a loss of composure left even Song Tonghai shaken. He asked nervously, is there some difficulty troubling you, elder? But what Fu Quanliang said next only grew stranger. Nothing at all. I'll need a quiet chamber for a brief period of seclusion. Don't disturb my meditation unless it's urgent. Of course, I'll have it arranged right away. Song Tonghai hurried off, uneasy. Watching this unfold, my eyes narrowed. Fu Chuanliang's reaction had confirmed some of my earlier suspicions. Huanling sect was aware of the Pavilion of Night Light's existence, yet Fu Quanliang had accepted this assignment to hold down the Song estate with no idea what he was actually walking into. Realizing this, a crucial truth suddenly dawned on me, I'd been caught in a major misunderstanding all along. Perhaps I'd been overestimating Huanling sect's strength this entire time. That night, I was given a side chamber. The moment I arrived, I went straight to rest. I needed to grow stronger as quickly as possible, to build up some real ability to withstand risk on my own. Fu Chuanliang's reaction had already planted plenty of troubling thoughts in my mind. In the end, the only one I could truly rely on was myself. But what I never expected was that Song Tonghai and Song Lingshua's thinking ran in the exact opposite direction. Even though Fu Chuanliang's reaction had been a bit strange, he hadn't simply walked away, which meant, surely, things weren't all that serious. After being on edge for so long, their nerves were starting to give out, and they found themselves leaning toward optimism. Denial is human nature, after all. I'd assumed Fu Quanliang would hold himself up in seclusion, but to my surprise, he emerged from meditation the very next day. The moment he came out, he started making all sorts of strange demands of Song Tonghai. He wanted delicacies from across the land, beautiful concubines, dancing girls, and Song Tonghai naturally complied with every request. But the Song family's savings had already been drained dry. With no other choice, he had to mortgage the family's ancestral home, hiring over a dozen singing girls to entertain Fu Quanliang. Silver flowed out like water. The courtyard where Fu Quanliang stayed had practically become an earthly paradise, filled with music and revelry every single night. I watched it all unfold. Even though I'd essentially pieced together the full picture of what was happening, I was actually hoping Fu Quanliang would indulge himself to his heart's content. My 100-day cultivation deadline was drawing closer and closer. I genuinely needed Fu Quanliang to buy me more time. I thought everything was firmly within my control, until one day, Song Lingxue suddenly showed up with a bundle in hand. These are the last of the pills left in the storehouse. I accepted the bundle. Cultivation was impossible without spirit medicine. But for some reason, after delivering the pills, Song Lingxue didn't leave, she simply sat down in the courtyard instead. I didn't bother hiding anything from her, popping a few golden elixir pills into my mouth and immediately beginning to absorb the essence of the sun. Only after I finished my cultivation session did she let out a sigh. That Fu Chuanliang's appetite keeps growing. He had a whole suckling pig this morning, then half a lamb at noon, like a starving ghost reincarnated who hasn't eaten in days. I chose to stay silent. Over the course of all these days, even Song Lingxue had started to sense something was off. A shadow crossed her gaze, and she asked, why did you come back that day? Helping the Song family brings you absolutely nothing. I was just trying my best to see it through, I answered. If it ultimately doesn't work, I'll run, but I won't bring you with me. I didn't dress it up at all, I simply laid out my thinking plainly. I'm not foolish enough to throw my life away for nothing. But strangely, hearing how blunt I was actually put Song Lingxue at ease. A faint smile crossed her face. Good, then. I kept thinking it would be a shame if you just died, like that. It would have been a real waste. I walked toward the room, asking as I went, how much of what I asked you to find have you gathered? If I want to raise my repair master rank, I need valuable, damaged antiques, the older and more precious, the better. The more experience I gain from restoring them. I've already placed them all in the storehouse for you, mostly old items that have sat around for years. It didn't cost much silver. Song Lingxue suddenly reached out and pressed down on my hand just as I was about to pull it back, her head still lowered. I still feel uneasy about something. After a long silence, I finally pulled my hand back and spoke. That's not possible. The moment the words left my mouth, Song Lingxue rose abruptly and walked quickly toward the door. Just as she stepped outside, she suddenly turned back and asked, "What kind of person do you think I am?" I paused for a moment, then offered a deliberately vague answer. "A clever one. I sometimes think I can be quite cruel, though." Song Lingxue pushed open the door and strode out quickly. Only once she'd passed through the courtyard gate did she slow her pace, covering her face with her hands, a quiet murmur slipping through her fingers. "I really am pathetic." Meanwhile, I stared at the closed door for a long moment, then finally stood and made my way to the courtyard, dousing myself with 2 buckets of well water for a cold rinse. I hadn't misread Song Lingxue's hints just now, but I still didn't dare cross that line. Once crossed, there'd be no walking away cleanly anymore, and I wasn't sure I could shoulder the weight of the Song family's crisis along with it. Clearing my thoughts, I changed clothes and headed to the storehouse, burying myself in repairing the various broken items Song Lingxue had brought back. Time slipped by. Fu Chuanliang's lifestyle grew increasingly extravagant, indulging himself without restraint, while the money for mortgaging the ancestral estate was nearly gone. Song Tonghai had no choice but to bow his head and borrow from the merchant guilds, barely managing to keep things afloat, though the pressure mounted with every passing day. But what else could be done? At least during the time Fu Quanliang had been here, the Song family hadn't faced another attack. And finally, my own important day arrived. In the storehouse, mid-repair on a fragment, I suddenly looked up. Through painstaking dedication to my craft, I'd finally broken through to first-tier repair master. Staring at the panel in my mind, golden light flickered in my eyes. I casually picked up a chipped jade bowl, and with a single thought, the bowl instantly became whole again, flawless. The repair count on the panel still showed 5 attempts remaining. The leveling up changes for repair masters were far more significant than I'd imagined. Even though the daily refresh count hadn't changed, I could now restore any item of spirit grade rarity or below without consuming a single repair attempt. But the biggest surprise was still to come as I stared intently at the jade bowl in my hand. Moments later, the jade bowl transformed into a bowl of solid gold, while I'd only expended a small amount of my own vital energy. This was the divine technique I just comprehended, touch of gold. I stood up and left the storehouse. I hadn't gone far when I ran straight into Song Lingxue. "Perfect timing, come with me." I said it casually, already walking straight toward Fu Chuanliang's courtyard. Song Lingxue followed for a while before asking, somewhat confused, "What exactly are you planning to do?" With less than 10 days left until my 100-day qi cultivation cycle completed, a single raised hand now carried at least 10,000 pounds of force. Fu Quanliang no longer posed any threat to me at all, in my eyes. There was one critical thing I needed to confirm right now. Before long, we stepped into the main hall, which was in complete disarray. Shoes and socks scattered everywhere, wine jars and cups discarded across every surface. Fu Quanliang glanced over and waved us in. "Miss Song, perfect timing, come, sit and have a few drinks with me." But Song Lingxue just pursed her lips, turning her head away toward the door, not bothering to respond. I glanced at the dancing girls nearby. "Out, all of you." As the dancing girls rose and filed toward the door, Fu Quanliang protested, "How dare you ruin my mood like this?" But before he'd even finished speaking, I drove a kick straight through the table in front of him, then shot my hand forward and clamped it tight around his throat. "Do you want to live, or do you want to die?" Fu Chuanliang's expression shifted instantly. "I want to live." I released my grip, my voice dropping low. "I ask, you answer. If a single word is a lie, I'll send you straight to your death." Freed from my grip, spiritual light flickered at Fu Chuanliang's fingertips, his instinct urging him to fight back, but the instant he sensed the raw, overwhelming vitality coursing through my body, all his resistance drained away. He rubbed his throat and muttered quietly. "Ask away." I cut straight to the point. "What exactly did Huanling Sec send you here to do?" But what Fu Quanliang said next left his expression twisting in horror. A slap cracked across Jiang Tsuanhu's face. "Wake up." After several more slaps, Jiang Tsuanhu, who'd been frozen in near-death stillness, gradually regained a flicker of consciousness. He slowly opened his eyes. What met his gaze was a face streaked with blood. Fu Chuanliang's mouth curled into a grin, slowly raising the iron sword, his smile turning faintly savage. "Remember this, the one who kills you today is Fu Quanliang." Crack. The iron sword came down hard, then rose and fell again and again, until Jiang Tsuanhu's upper body had been beaten into a bloody pulp. Fu Quanliang sensed the flying sword beneath his feet go still. Chu Jing stepped forward and picked it up. A wind-treading blade, a single glance, a single touch, among ice-edged blades, this was already top tier. Decades of bloodshed behind it, yet meticulously cared for by its owner, without a single flaw. It could boost a spirit spring cultivator's power by a full 30%. Chu Jing waited for a moment, already forming a plan. Qi cultivation method had its own techniques for controlling flying swords. He could use this one too, though he wouldn't feel entirely secure doing so. Not far off, Fu Quanliang came back to his senses, looking faintly astonished. What method did you use to mask your movements just now, vanishing completely from sight like that? He'd only ever heard rumors of certain treasures capable of such a feat. Chu Jing shook his head. I have something else to give you instead. What is it? Fu Quanliang blinked in surprise. The bronze resonance seal. Chu Jing opened his palm, his vital energy surging outward, condensing into a rune that he pressed directly into Fu Quanliang's forehead from a distance. From this moment forward, if I live, you live. If I die, you die. And if I die first? Fu Quanliang's face went pale. I'll burn you plenty of paper money, so you can still live well in the afterlife. After crossing into the spirit hall realm, time had been too short for Chu Jing to master more than two techniques. One was the art of invisibility, and the other was this bronze resonance seal. The invisibility technique was for survival. The bronze resonance seal, on the other hand, he'd cultivated specifically for Fu Quanliang alone. The bronze resonance seal carried heavy restrictions. It could only be used on a single target. Until the seal was lifted, or the creature bound to it died, it could never be placed on another living being. In ancient times, Qi cultivators typically used this technique to bind powerful, unusual servants as long-term companions along the cultivation path, way to ensure they had something to rely on, even after death. This was the very technique's origin. In truth, the bronze resonance seal's purpose extended far beyond that. Once the seal was placed, Chu Jing could sense, however faintly, the shifts in Fu Quanliang's emotional state. Ah! Fu Quanliang stood frozen for a moment, then suddenly shot to his feet, staring at the faintly cold expression on Chu Jing's face. His face flickered between pale and flushed, an internal struggle raging for a moment before he sank weakly back down. Could it be, you placed this kind of restriction on me because you want something from me? Is there anything I can do to help you? Chu Jing thought for a moment, then casually tossed the wind-treading sword at Fu Quanliang's feet, speaking slowly. We'll talk about it once you've proven you can survive long enough. What do you mean by that? Fu Quanliang glanced at the flying sword, puzzled. You're the one who killed him. Naturally, this sword belongs in your hands. Chu Jing crouched down beside Jiang Zuanhu's corpse, patting it down. Soon, from behind the man's waist, he pulled out a palm-sized pouch. The drawstring was knotted impossibly tight, no amount of brute force could pry it open. What is this? Chu Jing made no attempt to hide his ignorance, handing it over to Fu Quanliang. A storage pouch. It requires spiritual power to open. I can't use it. Fu Quanliang shook his head. Everything that belonged to Jiang Zuanhu should be inside. Something stirred in Chu Jing's mind. He gently channeled vital energy from within his body into the storage pouch in his hand, and a space roughly half a zhang square materialized in his mind, filled with a scattered assortment of objects. Chu Jing surveyed it briefly, getting a rough sense of the contents, then pulled out a piece of paper-thin jade. Before Chu Jing could even ask, Fu Quanliang spoke up on his own to explain. Spirit snacks, they accelerate cultivation speed, practically a luxury good in the cultivation world. A piece this size, how much could it be traded for? Could it be exchanged for mortal world currency? Chu Jing wanted to understand the purchasing power of spirit snacks. If it could be exchanged for mortal silver, a piece this size could buy out the entire Song family estate in the ordinary world. But nobody would actually trade something like this for ordinary currency, Fu Quanliang replied, then shook his head. It really depends on where you are. Sacred cultivation grounds never lack for spirit snacks. Low-grade ones aren't worth much, almost embarrassing to even give as a gift. But in some smaller, struggling sects without their own snack production, you might occasionally trade for something worthwhile. Most of the time, though, people just use them for cultivation. Chu Jing felt a flicker of disappointment, then pulled out every unfamiliar item from the pouch one by one, having Fu Quanliang explain each in turn. Once finished, he tucked the pouch away with satisfaction, slowly refining it using his own vital energy. Killing Jiang Zuanhu hadn't yielded much. The most valuable item was that wind-treading sword. But it had still given Chu Jing his first real foothold into the cultivation world, a small taste of prestige. That alone was enough. Not until dusk did Song Tonghai and Song Lingxue finally step into this courtyard, beginning to organize a cleanup crew. The moment Jiang Zuanhu had arrived, they'd heard Chu Jing's voice transmission and had stayed hidden ever since, only emerging now. The few dancing girls inside the room were already completely panicked, huddled together in a tight cluster, trembling in the corner, with no idea what had just happened outside. After Song Lingxue dismissed the girls, at Chu Zhang's request, she had Fu Quanliang's residence relocated to the edge of the Song estate, far away from Chu Zhang's own quarters. Jiang Zuanhu was dead, and now, the Pavilion of Nightlight's next move was absolutely critical. Whether Fu Quanliang could hold his ground as a shield was still very much an open question. Time slipped through their fingers like sand, and half a month passed in what felt like an instant. During those 2 weeks, the Song estate remained perfectly calm, without the slightest hint of anything unusual. The calm itself felt almost unsettling, enough to unnerve even Chu Jing. At dawn, as the first light broke, Chu Jing sat cross-legged in the courtyard, circulating his breath through a full cycle, drawing in the essence of sun and moon to deepen his cultivation. Unlike his 100-day Qi cultivation cycle, his progress was beginning to slow noticeably now. The yin and yang energy surrounding him had grown increasingly thin, and though he could still cultivate, the pace had clearly hit some kind of limitation. The sound of footsteps rose from outside the courtyard. Chu Jing slowly ended his session, looking toward Fu Quanliang as he rushed in, a faint sense of unease settling over him. What's happened? Fu Quanliang had already been warned not to approach without good reason. I just received a sect transmission, ordering me to return immediately. They said I don't need to concern myself with the Song family's affairs any longer. As he spoke, Fu Quanliang's expression grew increasingly strange. A junior brother of mine within the sect also sent me a private letter at the same time. It said Sister Song was ambushed and nearly killed. Her guardian, Elder Qin, was gravely wounded and nearly froze to death, but managed to make it back to the sect by sheer luck. Is Song Lingqing dead? Chu Zhang's eyes narrowed slightly as he asked for confirmation. The letter my junior brother sent didn't mention whether she lived or died. I'm afraid, Fu Quanliang hadn't finished speaking, but Chu Zhang had already done the math. If Elder Qin had suffered such grievous wounds, what chance did Song Lingqing stand? Combined with Huanling sect recalling Fu Quanliang and instructing him to abandon any involvement with the Song family's affairs, the odds were overwhelming that she was already dead. A sharp crack echoed from outside the courtyard gate. Song Lingxue stood there, her expression burning with emotion, a stone box lying shattered at her feet. A faint smile tugged at the corner of Chu Zhang's mouth as his eyes flickered, and soon a low chuckle escaped him, one he couldn't suppress. This deadlock has finally been broken. At the sound of his laughter, Song Lingxue snapped back to herself, her eyes reddening, her voice hoarse. What are you laughing about? Chu Zhang paid little attention to her reaction, the smile on his face only growing wider as he shook his head. Song Lingqing is dead now. In the eyes of the sect world, the two of you hold no value at all anymore. That's true for Huanling sect, and it's true for the Pavilion of Nightlight. Just the same. Jiang Zuan, whose death will naturally be pinned on Huanling sect, no one will ever connect it back to the Song family. Even if there's lingering resentment, the Song family now has earned a real chance to escape this entirely. There's no longer any risk of being hunted down by a sect. At the very least, there's now hope of survival. Song Lingxue didn't wait to hear more, she turned and ran off to find Song Tonghai. Chu Zheng slowly let his smile fade, turning to Fu Quanliang beside him, his tone dropping low. There's something I need you to do. What is it? Fu Quanliang's chest tightened. Before, it was Huanling sect that drove you to the very edge of life and death. Don't you want revenge? Revenge? Fu Quanliang felt a wave of absurdity wash over him. Revenge? How? The thought of revenge had never even crossed his mind. With a lower-tier immortal bone, how could he possibly take revenge against an entire great sect? A man's life ought to have some kind of ambition, Chu Jing said, slowly rising to his feet, gazing into the distance, raising a hand as though clutching the sun itself in his palm. I came into this life wanting to accomplish great things. The Song family matter is settled now. You lead me into Huanling sect, and I'll help you tear it down. What you couldn't do, I'll do for you. In Chu Zhang's eyes, Huanling sect and the Pavilion of Nightlight were really no different from each other, both were forces of the same color. The sects loomed over mortals like a shadow, but he was a person. A mortal man, not an immortal. Song Lingqing's death, and Huanling sect's response to it, had suddenly made many things clear to Chu Zhang. The Pavilion of Nightlight had never made a single direct move against the Song family, their real intentions had lain elsewhere all along. The true target had always been Song Lingqing, the dragon hidden in that bloodline. Now that the dragon had drowned in the deep sea before ever rising, there was naturally no further need to waste effort on the Song family. While Chu Zhang was deep in thought, Fu Quanliang had already gone still beside him. Tear down Huanling sect, those few words seemed to ignite something deep in his blood for a brief instant. Why should he be the one who had to die? Because his life was worthless. Fu Quanliang's breathing grew heavy. What he himself couldn't accomplish didn't mean Chu Zhang couldn't. Someday, perhaps, he too might get the chance to personally crush that elder's skull, just as today had unfolded. Fu Quanliang. Fu Quanliang. Chu Zhang called twice, but got no response. He reached out and patted Fu Quanliang's face. Hey, snap out of it. Fu Quanliang surfaced from the vision flooding his mind, looked at Chu Zhang, and gradually steadied himself. He could see it clearly now, this man's way of thinking ran quite differently from anyone ordinary, not a normal person, by any measure. Is there any way for me to enter Huanling sect? That was the most pressing question on Chu Zhang's mind right now. I didn't sense any spiritual fluctuation when you struck just now. Do you have an immortal bone? Fu Quanliang hesitated, he genuinely couldn't get a read on this man's logic. Chu Zhang immediately shook his head. If he had an immortal bone, he'd naturally find another way in entirely. Without one, there was no possibility of becoming a formal inner disciple. Fu Quanliang considered for a moment, then said, if you can conceal the strength inside your body well enough to slip past the entrance inspection, while displaying combat ability equivalent to an ordinary grandmaster, you could potentially enter as a menial laborer. The chi-nurturing realm, frankly, is roughly equivalent to a grandmaster, in some ways even slightly weaker. Sects generally welcome mortal grandmasters as laborers, since they consume no cultivation resources at all, a bit of common medicine and ordinary grain is all it takes to sustain them. Some grandmasters who train their bodies through outer sect tempering can even accomplish things that chi-nurturing realm disciples can't manage. A bargain deal for the sect. But laborers are still just laborers, not disciples. The gap in status compared to outer disciples is enormous. Without someone looking out for you up top, you'd inevitably get stuck with all the dirty, exhausting work. Grandmasters are common in the mortal world, far more numerous than outer disciples. As for deliberately cultivating mortal grandmasters, sects simply don't bother, it's far too wasteful of resources. First, martial talent requires natural aptitude, and second, it tends to breed unrest. Most young outer disciples sit somewhere between the chi-nurturing realm and the spirit spring realm, with the majority falling into chi-nurturing. In an actual fight, they aren't necessarily a match for a grandmaster. And once grandmasters grow numerous, with status gaps this severe between roughly equal power levels, conflict becomes inevitable. Immortal sprouts are rare and precious, any large-scale bloodshed is a loss for the sect, plain and simple. Even a lower-tier immortal bone is worth more than 10 grandmasters combined. For Chu Zheng, forcibly compressing the vital energy in his dantian into his flesh in a short amount of time would be no trouble at all. The only real concern was the entrance inspection. Immortal bone, and cultivation level, that's all they check. There's a spirit formation set up before the sect gates. None of your belongings can pass through with you. It's a miraculous device, once you've passed inspection through the formation, you'll be given a set of laborer's robes. That's how it works every single time you enter or exit the sect. Chu Jing felt a flicker of confusion at this. Isn't that excessively strict? Fu Quanliang shook his head. Not really, that's only for laborers. Disciples who travel outside the sect go through an entirely different, far more complex process. The arts of cultivation are countless and varied, and every time a disciple leaves and returns, it's a potential security risk. Every time someone returns, an elder personally verifies their identity, to guard against possession, soul transfer, or some demonic entity hiding inside a treasure smuggled back with a disciple. Throughout history, countless sects have fallen to internal corruption. Long-established sects with deep lineages always have defenses passed down from previous generations against internal threats, but most of those defenses can only guard against outside enemies, not traitors from within. The thought sent a flicker of excitement through Fu Quanliang. If he could truly bring Chu Jing into Huanling sect, it would be like planting a hidden bomb. Maybe someday, that bomb really could blow Huanling sect sky high. Chu Jing waited for a moment, then made his decision. We leave tomorrow, then. Since the news has already reached them, the sooner they departed, the better. The Pavilion of Nightlight might not care much about one minor figure like Jiang Tsunhu, but there was no telling whether some friendly fellow disciple of his might come looking for him eventually. Noon arrived in the blink of an eye. After receiving word from Huanling sect, Song Tonghai hadn't shown his face at all. Learning that Chu Jing planned to leave the next day, Song Lingxue stepped forward and dismissed every remaining servant in the household. In an instant, the once bustling Song estate was reduced to just a handful of people, an eerie quiet settling over the place. That afternoon, Chu Jing went out for a while, circling the perimeter of Luofeng City. There were still quite a few covert martial artists lurking nearby, their information networks far slower than Fu Qianliang's, with no idea the situation had shifted entirely. Chu Jing attempted to communicate with them, but the process turned out far from pleasant. In the end, Chu Jing came back having left behind a trail of corpses, men and women alike. By nightfall, Chu Jing sat cross-legged on his bed, packing his belongings. He dug up the immortal sect texts he'd previously buried underground, tucking them into his storage pouch. The pouch couldn't be carried into Huanling sect, though he'd need to figure out a solution for that later. The door suddenly swung open. Song Lingxue stepped quietly into the room, her expression calm. Leaving tomorrow, where are you headed? Huanling sect. Chu Jing didn't hide it, telling her the truth honestly. With Jiang Tsunhu dead, he'd done enough, the debt between him and the Song family was settled now. The next step, naturally, was to pursue what he himself wanted to do. Besides, the Song family's circumstances were no longer as dire as before. Learning Chu Zheng's destination, Song Lingxue seemed genuinely surprised. Why are you going to Huanling sect? For revenge. The moment the words left his mouth, to avoid any misunderstanding, Chu Jing thought it over and added, this has nothing to do with the Song family. I've already cleared out everyone setting up checkpoints around Luofeng City, you're free to leave directly now. Helping Fu Quanliang get his revenge is just a side benefit. As for why he'd chosen Huanling sect, it was simply because they appeared far weaker than the Pavilion of Nightlight. Among the nearby sects, they seemed like the easiest target by far. Even an old woman picking persimmons knows to grab the soft ones first, and with Fu Quanliang serving as an inside contact, Huanling sect was practically the optimal choice. Of everything Chu Zheng had said, Song Lingxue only believed the word revenge. There was no real feud between Huanling sect and Chu Zheng, she preferred to believe this revenge was meant for Song Lingqing instead. With that thought, she stepped forward slowly, walked to the edge of the bed, and pushed Chu Jing down onto it with a raised hand. Chu Jing. Before he could speak, Song Lingxue had already climbed onto the bed, settling herself across his waist. She looked down at him, casually pulling loose the band holding her hair, dark locks cascading down like a waterfall, her eyelids lowered, falling forward. Chu Jing glanced at the moonlight outside the window and murmured. Maybe we should wait until tomorrow, I prefer daytime. Absorbing moonlight at night raises the yin energy in my body, which tends to dull my combat readiness somewhat. But Song Lingxue didn't respond, she simply leaned down and bit firmly into the side of Chu Zheng's neck. Before dawn broke, a carriage slowly rolled out from the back courtyard of the Song estate. Song Lingxue, dressed plainly in blue-gray traveling clothes, a wide-brimmed hat shielding her face, urged the horse forward. Inside the carriage, Song Tonghai sat with his head bowed, his hair gone entirely white, his eyes no longer carrying their former golden gleam, clouded over now. He murmured under his breath, repeating one name. Chinger, my Chinger. He held something cradled against his chest. The Song estate itself stood completely empty, not a single soul left, not even a shadow. A letter had been left on the table in the main hall. Song Lingxue had left it behind. The message inside was simple. She hoped Chu Zheng would abandon his plan to confront Huanling sect, find somewhere else, and live a good life. She and the Song family would move forward, step by step, and there was no need to waste any more time on something so meaningless. Chu Zheng's expression remained blank. A faint glow ignited in his hand, and the letter turned to ash in an instant. Settling a debt, she made it sound simple. How precious had their union been to her. Song Lingxue owed him plenty. Thinking back on the previous night, Chu Zheng couldn't help but let out a sigh. In the end, this was still a body of 16 or 17 years, full of youthful vigor, lacking restraint. To have lost his composure so early would require considerable effort going forward to maintain the balance of yin and yang within his body. As for regret, that wasn't really a factor at all. Fu Quanliang carried his pack into the main hall and asked, "Are we leaving now?" "Let's go." Chu Zheng turned and walked toward the gates of the Song estate, raising one hand toward the sky. Vital energy surged from his palm, shooting straight into the heavens, and in an instant condensed into a roaring ball of fire. The very moment the two of them stepped through the gate, the fireball overhead suddenly erupted, raining down as a sheet of flame, blanketing the entire Song estate within seconds. This minor technique, manipulating the flow of mist and flame, was nothing more than basic spirit transformation craft. To avoid leaving too many traces, to prevent any sect from tracking them back, burning everything clean was the safest approach. The corpses he'd brought back the day before now served their purpose, helping disguise the scene as a wholesale massacre. The fire snakes climbed high, devouring everything in front of the gate down to nothing. Watching the century-old estate gradually vanish in the flames, a slight frown crossed Chu Zheng's brow, his fingertips trembling faintly. He'd never imagined that one day, he would personally set fire to a 100-year-old historical site, just to erase any trace of what had happened here. As an artifact restorer in his past life, here he was, with his own hands, burying a piece of history. Though, in the grand scheme of the world, this small piece of history meant nothing at all. "Let's go." Chu Zheng turned away, asking offhandedly, "How far is it to Huanling sect from here?" "Not far. There's a branch sect just 20,000 miles away. Once we arrive there, we can take a flying vessel back to the main sect." "How long did it take you to get here originally?" "When I first came, a senior sister escorted me. It took less than 2 days. For the two of us, just walking it should take about half a month." "Was that senior sister of yours good-looking?" "Of course she was." Bathed in the glow of the towering flames, the two figures gradually faded into the distance down the street, vanishing without a trace. The fire burned for an entire day and night. With that, one more century-old noble house in Wuyang Prefecture ceased to exist. A few days later, over 100 armored cavalry rode up at a gallop, stopping in front of the ruins. "We're too late after all. What a shame." Staring at the charred remains before him, Zhao Yunheng, dressed in full battle armor, let out a long sigh. Upon learning that Song Lingqing had been ambushed and killed, he'd rushed back from the capital immediately, hoping there might still be a chance to see his earlier wish fulfilled. But despite rushing as fast as he could, he'd still arrived too late. Then again, missing this might not necessarily be a bad thing. Beside him, Zhao Jichang shook his head. The Song family was never going to survive this overwhelming fortune of theirs anyway, tangled up in so many affairs, better not to have gotten involved at all. At that, Zhao Yunheng laughed with a mocking edge. "You've already married 4 noble ladies from the capital in one go, spending every night as a newlywed. Of course you wouldn't be interested in this Song girl anymore. Isn't this the Song estate?" Before Zhao Yunheng even finished speaking, a voice suddenly called out from nearby. Out of nowhere, a figure had appeared amid the ruins, a man in a blue robe, looking to be around 20, his skin glowing faintly, a dot of blood-red cinnabar marked between his brows, adding an eerie, otherworldly quality to his otherwise refined features. "And you are?" Zhao Yunheng frowned slightly as he answered. "Yes, this is the Song estate." The man in blue frowned, repeating his earlier question with mounting impatience. How insolent. The sound of dozens of blades being drawn at once cracked through the air, this man's blatant disrespect instantly enraging the 100-plus cavalry behind Zhao Yunheng. Whoosh! A dull thud echoed out. Every cavalryman who'd drawn a blade went deathly pale instantly, struck speechless. "This is the Song estate, sir. Forgive my poor command of my men, my subordinates acted foolishly and offended you, elder. I beg the elder's forgiveness." Zhao Yunheng's expression turned grave as he dismounted, instinctively shielding Zhao Jichang behind him, bowing in apology. Hearing this, the man in blue slowly narrowed his eyes. "You're using a dead man to pressure me. Where is Zhao Tingxian right now?" "Zhao Tingxian. Zhao Tingxian. Zhao Tingxian." His tone climbed higher and higher with each repetition, and 4 eyes opened across the void, rippling waves spreading through empty space. A deep rumble. Thunder. Before the dust had even settled, towering thunderclouds suddenly billowed across the sky, condensing into a pair of massive eyes devoid of any human emotion, their depths a churning chaos, drawing yin and yang energy into a violent swirl. The instant the thunderclouds appeared, the blue-robed man's face went deathly pale. His expression shifted into pure terror. Before he could even open his mouth, a colossal sword of lightning descended from the heavens, the pressure of 4 heavens crashing down upon him, cleaving straight through the crown of his head. A low hum. Not far off, Zhao Yinheng felt only the faintest breeze brush past his face. When he opened his eyes again, every last trace of the Song estate had vanished entirely. All that remained was a crater whose depths couldn't be seen. News of the Song family's annihilation spread with stunning speed. Within days, it had swept across the entire empire, becoming the talk of every tavern and tea-house among the martial world. But the upheaval rippling through the cultivation circles of the surrounding kingdoms was far more violent than anything happening in the mortal world. The mere fact that Fu Quanliang had gone against the natural order and crossed kingdom borders to kill Jiang Zun, who had already sent ripples through the lower ranks of disciples across several nearby sections, a qi-nurturing cultivator killing a spirit spring cultivator. Only a rare handful of exceptional talents could ever pull that off. Fu Quanliang, an obscure, unremarkable outer disciple, had unquestionably pulled off a miracle. But what shocked the surrounding sects even more, some of the strongest among them even suspected that Zhao Tingxian had crossed the threshold into true immortality, ascending to godhood. Compared to Zhao Tingxian, Fu Quanliang's existence barely registered as a footnote. This particular piece of news only circulated among a narrow circle of high-ranking sect officials. For a time, every cultivator within the empire's borders pulled back considerably, exercising far more caution than usual. Some sects even withdrew their branch garrison stationed within the empire entirely, recalling every disciple posted there. In the kingdom of Tianxian, within the Huanling mountain range, Huanling sect had thrived here for 10,000 years. Across hundreds of thousands of miles, very few rivals could match its power, perhaps 2 or 3 at most. The Huanling mountain range stretched across more than 13,000 miles, suppressing a top-tier spirit vein beneath its surface, sustaining the cultivation of tens of thousands of disciples within the sect. The spiritual energy it breathed in and out daily flowed like an ocean, and the sky above blazed with brilliant, otherworldly light. At the foot of the mountain range sat a sprawling city spanning nearly 100 miles, Huanling City. This place served both as the entrance to the mountain range and as the connecting passage between mortals and immortals. Even those born with natural immortal bones couldn't always guarantee their descendants would inherit the same gift. There were still plenty of mortal-bodied descendants. These particular individuals held a status distinct from ordinary mortals, the blood of cultivators ran through their veins, so naturally they could never return to ordinary mortal life. Yet they also lacked the qualifications to walk the immortal path, leaving them to live out their lives within this city. Compared to ordinary people, their own descendants carried a significantly higher chance of producing an immortal sprout. Over time, this naturally made the city a steady, reliable source of fresh blood for the sect. Within these city walls, all manner of people mingled together, cultivators, mortals, and a substantial population of martial artists. Not every cultivator here belonged to Huanling sect, many were practitioners from smaller sects, conducting business in this city, trading for resources difficult to find anywhere else in the outside world. Most of these martial artists carried some unresolved ambition, hoping to try their luck here. A fortunate few managed to break through into the Grandmaster realm. Of course, within this city, the term Grandmaster wasn't actually used. They were simply referred to as warriors instead, a nod to the martial path itself. Below warrior rank, everyone else was simply called a martial artist. Though sprawling, Huanling City was meticulously organized. The eastern district connected directly to the Huanling mountain range, anchored by a colossal spirit formation, making it the area richest in spiritual energy. This was where most cultivators, and the majority of warriors, conducted their activities. The southern district was largely home to the bloodline relatives of Huanling sect members, land that was extraordinarily expensive, and over time, several great clans had taken root, effectively serving as extensions of Huanling sect's influence within the city. The northern district was packed with taverns, gambling dens, and pleasure houses, the most uninhibited, freewheeling part of Huanling City, even offering specialized services catering exclusively to cultivators. The western district, meanwhile, was a chaotic mixing pot, more closely resembling the ordinary mortal world, drawing every kind of person imaginable, including no shortage of petty criminals and con artists, with hidden black markets scattered throughout. The 4 districts were clearly divided, and every boundary point was monitored and managed by Huanling sect disciples. Entry required prior registration and collecting a token first. Anyone caught crossing district boundaries without authorization would be sent directly to the mines, sentenced to 10 years of labor. The mines saw no daylight at all, and some of the tunnels were thick with toxic, suffocating fumes accumulated over years. For a mortal-bodied laborer, whether they'd come out alive after going in was anyone's guess. In the northern district, at a noisy corner of a bustling street, a long line had formed outside a small shop. The crowd ranged wildly in age, anywhere from 16 to well past 70, all men, nearly every one of them wearing a mask covering most of their face. A banner fluttered above the shop's entrance, striking and unusual, emblazoned with a row of bold, eye-catching characters, 1,000-year family medical tradition, miraculous hands, restoring vitality. A real man doesn't settle for less. If you're going to be a man, be a true one. A man's most precious quality is resilience, strength. Be the unshakable pillar your family deserves. Be the firm foundation your household can lean on. Be a man, stand tall. The shop was divided into two sections by a single hanging curtain. The outer room was packed with men, every eye fixed longingly on that curtain. After what sounded like a brief examination, a middle-aged man in a long robe stepped out slowly, walking with his head held high, radiating vigor, moving with the bearing of a tiger surveying its territory, an aura of overwhelming confidence rolling off him. Next. A flat call rang out from the inner room. The burly man at the front of the line hurried to lift the curtain and squeeze inside. Dr. Chu, thank you for your patience all these months. The burly man's face split into a wide grin. Your needlework is the most miraculous thing I've ever experienced, my body gets stronger by the day. Chu Zheng set down his teacup, asking casually, how many visits is this? Third time. This one should about finish it off. Lie down. Chu Zheng gestured idly toward the couch nearby, plucking up a silver needle between his fingers. Sage-like precision. He inserted it. Internal vigor still weak, blood and energy slightly depleted. Reparable. Chu Zheng casually placed needles at a few irrelevant pressure points, waited a moment, then opened the repair panel, flicked his fingertip lightly, and slowly withdrew the needles. There. 2 lower-tier spirit stones. Many thanks, Dr. Chu. The burly man climbed off the couch, stretched out his muscles, his face glowing with satisfaction, thanking him profusely over and over, immediately pulling out the spirit stones and offering them with both hands. Chu Zheng accepted them, weighing them casually in his palm, essentially 2 small fortunes in his hand right now. Ordinary mortal gold and silver had no value within Huanling City, everything here ran on the spirit coins issued by Huanling sect itself. 100 spirit coins could be exchanged for 1 lower-tier spirit stone at any of the sect's official exchange counters. Chu Zheng didn't accept spirit coins, only spirit stones. An average martial artist, working themselves to exhaustion in this city for an entire month, would earn no more than 20 or 30 spirit coins, going without food or drink for a full year just to save up 2 or 3 spirit stones. The day Chu Zheng had arrived in Huanling City, he hadn't rushed straight into the sect. Instead, he'd sent Fu Quanliang in first, while he himself waited outside the sect gates for word. A full month had now passed. This long a stretch with no unusual disturbances was already proof enough that Fu Quanliang had entered the sect safely, without incident. Opening this medical practice had itself been an idea Chu Zheng picked up from his experience with Fu Quanliang. Back at the Song estate, Fu Quanliang had once indulged in excess to the point of injury, and after Chu Zheng repaired his condition, the depletion in his body had been fully restored. Once he'd gotten his bearings in Huanling City, Chu Zheng decided to open exactly this kind of medical practice here. He hung up the same kind of advertisement he remembered from a certain men's clinic back in his past life, and business boomed almost immediately. The area was surrounded by pleasure houses and gambling dens, and most of the regular visitors here carried some status, never short on spirit coins, with no shortage of men whose bodies had been depleted by excess. Earning spirit snacks through the panel was pure profit, with virtually no cost at all. Chu Zheng was careful, never restoring anyone's body fully in a single session, typically splitting the work into 2 or 3 visits. For clients who looked especially wealthy, he'd sometimes stretch it out to 7 or 8 visits, taking it slow and steady, accumulating wealth bit by bit. In just 1 month, Chu Zheng had already amassed a genuinely staggering fortune, enough to make any cultivator's eyes go green with envy. Next. A figure pulled back the curtain and stepped inside, motionless. It's been a while. Dr. Chu, everyone please head back, we're closing early today. Come back tomorrow. Chu Zheng glanced at the newcomer, then lifted the curtain and stepped out to start clearing the crowd. Those still waiting in line outside all sighed in disappointment and reluctantly dispersed. Everyone who came here kept their faces covered, clearly nursing some unspeakable affliction. No one would dare cause a scene here. The slightest leak could mean total ruin to their reputation. In the blink of an eye, the area in front of the shop emptied out completely. Why did it take you this long to come see me? Chu Zheng shut the door, and, before Fu Quanliang could even open his mouth, fired off his own question first. So, what's the latest on the Song family matter? Do you think the sect just lets people wander in and out as they please? Anyone leaving the mountain gates needs an elder's written authorization. This time, I barely managed to secure a mission just to get out at all. Fu Quanliang explained, sounding faintly exasperated, then continued. After the elder verified my identity, he asked me how I'd pulled it off. I told him I'd secretly recruited a few warriors to help, first using a spirit talisman to wound him gravely, then working together to finish him off. That's it. Seeing that Fu Quanliang had nothing more to say, Chu Zheng couldn't hide his surprise. They actually believed that. They believed it, Fu Quanliang said, somewhat at a loss for words. What more do you want? He's just a minor outer disciple. For this incident to draw the attention of an inner elder for personal questioning was already an extraordinary exception. Sure, this feat had earned him a bit more respect among the outer disciples, but fundamentally, nothing had really changed. A lower-tier immortal bone remains a lower-tier immortal bone, it doesn't change the fundamentals. Still need to take on missions just to support myself. Coming back to himself, Chu Zheng asked offhandedly, have you figured out the cause of Song Lingqing's death yet? At that, Fu Quanliang froze for a moment, then suddenly shook his head vigorously. No, she's not dead. I heard that Elder Qin Feng is the one close to death now. Not dead. Chu Zheng couldn't quite hide his surprise. Right, but it's about the same as being dead. Word is, when Elder Qin Feng carried her back, every meridian in her body was destroyed, her immortal bone shattered, only a single thread of vital energy keeping her alive, barely sustained by Elder Qin Feng's own power. Fu Quanliang shook his head, a hint of genuine pity in his voice. The sect poured enormous resources into saving her, even tapping into one of their most closely guarded secret elixirs, granted by the blessing of a 10,000-year spirit hound. Even then, it only managed to save her life, not her immortal bone. Her standing within the sect now is incredibly awkward. She hasn't been formally listed among the true disciples, but she's essentially a ruined cultivator now. Right now there are no fewer than 70 or 80 disciples vying to take her place as a true inner disciple. The status of a true disciple is an extraordinarily privileged one, inner elders fighting over each other to recruit and protect them, near unlimited access to every kind of cultivation resource, practically able to move heaven and earth with a flick of the wrist. They're the future pillars of Huanling sect. Song Lingqing, by comparison, has become a dead weight now, sitting in a position that produces nothing. It's only a matter of time before she's pushed out entirely. It's easy to predict, her fall from true disciple status is already imminent. She might not even be able to hold on to her status as an inner disciple at all, a complete collapse from the top. No wonder, Chu Jing thought, a faint chill running through him. A fate like that was essentially no different from death. No wonder the Pavilion of Night Light had eased off the pressure on the Song family. Strictly speaking, he and Song Lingqing had only ever met once, yet it was Song Lingqing who had first pushed open this world's door for him. What a shame, he thought. Fate is unpredictable. Chu Jing gathered his thoughts and asked casually, has my own entry into the sect made any progress? At first, he hadn't even known there was a special territory called Huanling City existing outside Huanling sect itself. Now that he did, his earlier fixation on entering the sect proper had faded somewhat. After all, he could still brush up against the immortal path right here in Huanling City. The sect's been planning to recruit a fresh batch of laborers from Huanling City recently. Fu Quanliang replied, then shifted his tone abruptly. But I'd actually recommend you wait a bit longer. Why? Chu Jing felt a flicker of confusion. This particular batch of laborers is specifically being requested for mining work. There's an ancient mine shaft, littered with countless bones, the site of an ancient battlefield dating back tens of thousands of years at the very least. Extremely dangerous. Having said his piece, Fu Quanliang couldn't help looking a little smug. This was insider information. If not for his connections, an ordinary outer disciple would never have access to news like this. How many years ago did you say? Chu Jing latched onto the key detail immediately, his eyes practically glowing. A battlefield from tens of thousands of years ago. In the eastern district of Huanling City, as the sun dipped toward the west, the spiritual energy from all directions converged here. The eastern district shared the same earth as the Huanling mountain range itself, setting it worlds apart from the other three districts. Simply staying in this district required paying a lower-tier spirit stone every single day. You're making me pay too. Fu Quanliang stared at Chu Zheng in disbelief, unable to fathom how someone earning money by the bucketful could possibly be this stingy, unwilling to part with even a single lower-tier spirit stone. As an outer disciple of Huanling sect himself, Fu Quanliang didn't need to pay spirit stones to enter or exit the eastern district, but he couldn't cover anyone else's share. Chu Zheng's portion still had to be paid. That's the rule. Spend wisely where it matters, and save where you can. There'll be plenty of places to use spirit stones later. Chu Zheng remained completely unmoved, gesturing for Fu Quanliang to hand over the stones. One spirit stone is one small fortune. That comparison Fu Quanliang had used earlier had stuck firmly in Chu Zheng's mind. It wasn't a trivial amount at all. Fu Quanliang, utterly speechless, pulled out 2 lower-tier spirit stones and handed them over to his fellow sect member. They'd be staying here for 2 days. The moment they entered the eastern district, Chu Jing immediately sensed the difference. The ambient spiritual energy in the air surged sharply, and even the vital energy within his own body began stirring with newfound vitality. After cycling through a brief round of breathing, Chu Jing felt a flicker of genuine surprise. His cultivation speed here was at least double what it was outside. And this was still outside the actual sect grounds. Inside the sect itself, the spiritual energy would surely be even richer. He glanced at the sky, still early in the day. Chu Jing casually found a lively, bustling spot along the street, set up a small stall, and planted a little flag reading, recycling old and damaged cultivation tools. Fair prices, no heirloom too shabby. The profit margin on cultivation tools dwarfed anything he made from his medical practice. Broken cultivation tools, since they were inscribed with spirit formations, mostly couldn't have their materials recycled for reuse at all, essentially reduced to scrap metal, worth only a handful to a few dozen spirit stones at most. Only a few washed-up martial artists scraping by in this city would even bother spending small change on this kind of junk. No matter how ruined, a cultivation tool was still a cultivation tool. In the mortal world, it would be considered a legendary weapon. A complete low-tier cultivation tool, even one of the poorest quality, was still worth at least 500 to 800 spirit stones. Fully restored through alchemical repair, the margin between buying low and selling high amounted to at least 100-fold profit. Fu Quanliang had come out of the sect this time with his own mission to complete and his own business to attend to. He stayed crouched alongside Chu Zheng on the street for about an hour before getting up and leaving. With little else demanding his attention, Chu Zheng split his focus, pulling up the repair panel and pouring every repair attempt he had today into the profound heaven seal. Name, Chu Zheng. Cultivation, First Tier, Stage 7. Technique, Grand Heavenly Cycle Breathing Manual, Tier 6, fully restored. Dragon Tiger Body, Tier 4, fully restored. Divine Technique, Profound Heaven Seal, 3rd Incarnation, Tier 5, incomplete, currently restorable. Touch of Gold, Tier 1, fully restored. Invisibility, Tier 1, fully restored. Repair Master, Tier 1, Experience, 231,000 out of 1,000. Repair attempts remaining today, 0. Currently reparable, Profound Heaven Seal, 3rd Incarnation, 200 out of 300. Grand Heavenly Cycle Breathing Manual, fully restored, 0 remaining out of 1,000. Dragon Tiger Body, fully restored, 0 remaining out of 500. At this pace, in another 20 days, the Profound Heaven Seal would be fully restored. It was a Tier 5 divine technique, and Chu Zheng had remained intensely curious about it from the start. The information embedded within this particular technique was critically important. At the very least, the Profound Heaven Seal's existence proved that cultivation wasn't the only path forward in this world. The martial arts of mortal men were never confined to the ordinary world alone. Just as with his own alchemical repair method, martial cultivation must once have had its own path of ascension, capable of climbing all the way to the very pinnacle of human achievement. Why had that path withered away? There had to be some enormous secret behind it. If Li Mingzhou hadn't thrown that fragment of stolen merit into the sea, Chu Jing might have had a chance to uncover this mystery sooner. Thinking back on it, even now, Chu Jing felt a genuine pang of regret. Most people, when their cultivation tools broke beyond repair, chose to melt them down in true fire, erasing every trace before discarding them, or simply locking them away at the bottom of a chest. A cultivation tool inevitably carried lingering traces and energy signatures from whoever had wielded it. If it fell into the hands of a cultivator skilled in certain obscure arts, casting a curse from a distance or tracking its location remotely, were both entirely possible. Chu Jing crouched on the street, waiting for nearly 2 hours, but only completed 2 transactions, and both came from the very same person. A spirit cleansing robe, Tier 1, damaged, still carrying the faint, fresh scent of recently disturbed earth. Sharp eyes, one look, and you can already tell this was stripped off a corpse not long after burial. Reparable, 0 out of 30. Cloud-chasing boots, Tier 1, damaged. These boots have crossed mountains and rivers enough to last you 1,000 years. Passed down through 5 generations of owners, the soles worn clean through. Reparable, 0 out of 50, 50. Without the panel's notification, Chu Zheng wouldn't have noticed anything unusual about that spirit-cleansing robe. The garment had been washed meticulously clean, with just a large tear ripped open across the chest, the spirit formation woven into it shattered beyond use. This left Chu Jing a little disappointed. The robe had been washed so thoroughly that it had stripped away whatever traces once lingered on it, leaving it with far less character. The cloud-chasing boots, by contrast, were ruined far more thoroughly. The sole worn down to barely half, weathered and aged by years of wind and frost, clearly carrying real history, and that suited Chu Zheng's taste perfectly. To anyone else, these 2 items would seem almost absurdly worthless. Chu Jing spent 40 spirit coins on each, the combined total not even reaching a single lower-tier spirit snack. Still, these 2 items were worth carrying on his person. The mine shaft he was headed toward wasn't located within the Huangling mountain range itself, so inspections there wouldn't be nearly as strict. A storage pouch would definitely not be permitted, but 2 battered, broken cultivation tools wouldn't draw anyone's attention at all. Just as Chu Zheng was about to pack up his stall, a voice suddenly called out from overhead. "Would you take this?" Chu Zheng tattooed, glanced upward, studied the item briefly, and felt a flicker of genuine surprise. Standing before him was a half-grown boy, no older than 16 or 17, not far off from Chu Zheng's own actual age. His frame still hadn't fully filled out, somewhat thin and frail, dressed in a faded pale blue robe that had clearly been washed many times, carrying about him a distinct, scholarly air, the first such presence Chu Zheng had encountered since arriving here. One glance was all it took to know this boy was a man of letters. And, more strikingly, this young man was a mortal, a completely ordinary mortal who had never trained in martial arts at all. For someone like that to show up in the Eastern District was more than a little strange. The people who came and went through this place were almost exclusively cultivators or martial artists. Mortals were nowhere to be seen here at all. The boy held a wooden box roughly 2 feet long in both hands, his expression hesitant, as if embarrassed. "Let me see it." Chu Zheng had always felt a natural fondness for men of letters. He reached out immediately, took the box from the boy's hands, and opened it. Inside lay a wooden sword, more than half of it missing entirely. The tip and a portion of the blade had vanished without a trace. The broken edge was covered in scorched, blackened patterns. Heaven's Might Sword, Tier 6, damaged. The boy tentatively held up 5 fingers. 5 lower-tier spirit stones, and we have a deal. Chu Zheng had no interest in haggling over the price. He nodded immediately and sealed the deal. He pulled out 6 lower-tier spirit stones and handed them over. "What's this for?" The boy stared at the extra spirit stone he'd just been given.